Elizabeth at A Literary Princess. If you are new here, welcome. I'm a 6-year PhD candidate in English literature with a focus on Victorian women novelists. And as you might expect, I love to read. So today I have a special Jane Austen July video for you. If you don't know, Jane Austen July is an event hosted by Katie from Books and Things, Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, and Claudia from Spinster's Library, and it is all about reading Jane Austen in July. So today I will be talking about my experience rereading Pride and Prejudice as an adult. So I have done 2 of these rereading as an adult videos before, one for the Twilight Saga and one for the Chronicles of Narnia, which are of course written for a younger audience. And Pride and Prejudice is really not. However, I realized upon deciding to reread Pride and Prejudice for Jane Austen July this year that I have not read this book since I was 17 years old. So I thought it would be fun to kind of take a look at how my thoughts have changed on it and kind of what I've noticed now that I am an adult and it's been a really long time. So yes, let's jump in. So first, I do want to give a little bit of my background with this book. I was given this copy of Pride and Prejudice when I was 13 years old for my middle school graduation by my aunt, who gave me a lot of other classics, including Wuthering Heights and The Mill on the Floss. I attempted to read it when I first got it and was just not into it. I was a big Stephen King fan. This is very far from Stephen King. Just wasn't my jam at the time. However, the next year, when I was 14, I started to become really into classics. I read Wuthering Heights, and then that led me to read the other books my aunt had given me, including Pride and Prejudice, and this time I adored it. I then reread it my senior year of high school when I was 17 for class, and I know I wrote my term paper on it, on what Jane Austen considers a good marriage, and I was analyzing all the different marriages that we see in the book. That was a fun paper. I liked that paper. Anyway, and it turns out that was the last time I read it, which didn't feel right to me at first. I was like, no, I must have read it in college at some point. And then I started reading the book. I was like, wow, no, I have not read this since high school. And I think because I've seen the movie so many times, the 2005 version directed by Joe Wright, starring Keira Knightley, is one of my favorite movies ever. And because I have seen that so frequently in the years between being 17 and now, I just kind of have the story so in my head that it felt like I had read the book. But of course, there are things that version of the movie leaves out. It's actually a pretty good adaptation, I must say. Like, all the major plot points are there, a lot of major scenes are there, a lot of the dialogue is right out of it. But things are condensed because, you know, this is a 90-minute movie or whatever, and this is a over 300-page book. So, let's talk about just what I noticed. So the first thing, and I think the biggest thing, is that as an adult who has now studied 19th century literature extensively, even though I am a Victorianist, I have done a lot of work with early 19th century literature as well. My master's degree is actually in Romantic and Victorian literature, and I have studied Jane Austen in many classes. So because of that, I now have a much better grasp on the social system, the class structure, the way etiquette was, than I did definitely at 14 and even at 17 when I had a teacher telling us some of this stuff. But I have a much better understanding of why Darcy is of a higher status than Elizabeth, even though they are both technically gentry and why certain people have certain titles and why certain things are complete social faux pas that I really wouldn't have realized. I think a big thing for me is Mary in Pride and Prejudice is one of the younger sisters of the Bennets. I'm just working on the assumption that you all know the story of Pride and Prejudice. So, spoilers if you don't, and also I'm not giving a plot summary. Sorry. So Mary, one of the younger sisters, I never really understood why she was so, like, why she was considered just as kind of socially terrible as Lydia or Kitty, the other younger sisters. And I now have a much better understanding of why her putting herself forward to play the piano and sing without really being asked to is inappropriate, and why some of her just sayings that are kind of all taken from books are just, no. So, and also Mr. Collins, I have a much better idea now of why it was so inappropriate for Mr. Collins to approach Mr. Darcy and introduce himself, even though they had not been introduced by anyone. And the fact that you needed to be introduced by another person in order to make an acquaintance. So I have a much better grasp on that now, and that really contributes a lot to the reading of the social satire and social commentary in this book, which is a major part of it. As a teenager, I was focused mostly on the love story between Elizabeth and Darcy, and I did get into some of the intricacies of marriage and how money could affect marriage, but I did not understand the social critique at all. And it was such a joy to read this and really understand what's going on and be able to laugh about it. Which leads me to my next point, is that this book is hilarious, which I already knew. Like, I found it funny when I first read it. I found the movie funny. And I've read the rest of Jane Austen's work, and like, I know that she's funny, but I don't think I appreciated a lot of the humor in this, especially some of the just more subtle things about it. I've seen that particularly stood out to me this time is that Elizabeth and Jane were arriving back from Elizabeth had been visiting the Collinses and Jane had been staying with her aunt and uncle in London, and they arrived back together at an inn, and Lydia and Kitty have gone to meet them. And Lydia and Kitty come in and they're like, "Oh, we thought we would treat you to this nice lunch, but you're going to have to give us the money because we spent it in the shops." And I just felt like, and then they're all going on when they tell the family, "Oh, we treated Elizabeth and Jane to lunch." I'm like, girl, first of all, the most little sister move ever. And I say that as a little sister. But just little things like that I didn't notice at all as a teenager because I was really focused on the love story and how romantic it was. I'm like, yeah, I could tell you things are funny here and Mrs. Bennet is kind of ridiculous, but just little things that you don't notice when you're basically a kid. The introduction of this version, which I never read before, this is the Everyman's Library edition, by the way. But the introduction of this talks a lot about Jane Austen and her use of irony. And I'm much better able to understand that now than I was at 14 or 17. Because, 14 and 17, I'm sure I got some of it, but not nearly as much as is here, because there's a lot here. Another thing that I noticed, and I think this was kind of a surprise to me because I have been watching the movie so often as opposed to reading the book, and the movie is naturally condensed because it is a movie, I didn't realize how much time actually passes in this book. Like, sometimes at the beginning of a chapter, it'll be like, oh, several months passed. And that's just something I didn't realize was happening because the movie, you know, they just kind of move through the events to get it all into the 90 minutes. But there is a great deal of time passing, and these visits that they take to other people are really long. Elizabeth stays with Mr. and Mrs. Collins for like 6 weeks. I'm like, first of all, I love my friends, but I don't think I would want to stay with one of them for 6 weeks. Like, I love you guys, but no. No. Living together is one thing, staying as a guest in someone's house is a completely different thing. So the fact that these visits are just so incredibly long is like, wow, that's just a lot of time. So, I mean, between the start of the book and the end of the book, it's at least a year, but I'm pretty sure more than a year. More like 2. But maybe not. Maybe like a year and a half. It's kind of hard to tell because I wasn't like mapping it out or anything. But a huge amount of time passes in this book. Or not a huge amount of time. It's not like it's decades or even years and years. But when you compare it to how the movie makes it seem, where it's like this all happens in a matter of a few months, no, this is all quite drawn out. And a lot of it is just them, you know, being at their house and waiting. There's a lot of waiting in this book. And Jane Austen kind of skims over it. Like, she's like, oh, such and such amount of time passes. But yeah, just the amount of time that goes by was really surprising to me. I think because of all the time that is passing within the book, it actually makes a lot more sense for certain things to happen the way that they're happening. In the 2005 movie, we really only see the Bennets interact with Mr. Wickham once or twice. And like, they seem to like him, but like, they barely spend any time with him. Whereas in the book, they are actually spending quite a bit of time with him and the other officers. They are dining with the officers at their Uncle and Aunt Phillips' house. The officers occasionally are coming to the Bennet house. And I think that's something that's really, you miss in the movie. And it makes a lot more sense knowing all that for how they were so sure Mr. Wickham was a good person, because they have spent time with him. And he is so amiable. And it's not just like they had one conversation and Elizabeth is like, yes, I will trust anything this strange man says. So that is something that I noticed. And I don't know if I noticed that as a teenager, maybe, but it's just gone out of my head because things are so replaced by the movie version. And it had been so long since I read this. I mean, over a decade. Ouch. I also, and I suppose this kind of goes with the social class things, but I understood now as an adult much more about the money than I did as a teenager. So as a teenager, like, I understood that, yes, okay, Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley are rich. The Bennets are not rich. They're like, they have enough to live on right now, but when Mr. Bennet dies, they'll be poor because of the entail that leaves the estate to Mr. Collins. But for a 17-year-old and definitely for a 14-year-old, I think a lot of that is just kind of over the head. So I understood much better how the different sums of money were, how this amount of money is left to this person upon the death of so-and-so, and then that's their income. And so yeah, just a much better understanding of that, which of course that's also a major part of the book, is money. And a major part of marriage in early 19th century England was money. And I kind of got that as a teenager, but not nearly as much as I do now. It's actually funny. My husband and I were watching the 2007 movie of Northanger Abbey, and he was asking me, he was like, well, why, spoilers for Northanger Abbey, he was like, he didn't understand why General Tilney basically kicks Catherine Morland out of the house. I'm explaining to him, I'm like, so he thought that she was rich because John Thorpe said that she was rich, and now he's realizing she's not an heiress, so he's cutting the acquaintance. And and my husband's like, no, but that's not the point. I'm like, no, but that is the point. He's like, but money isn't the point. I'm like, money is the point, because he's thinking from a 21st century viewpoint. And I'm like, no, you have to understand that in the 19th century, marriage really wasn't about love. If you got love, like, good for you. It was largely about money and social status. So now that I know that, I'm much better able to understand this. But yeah, my husband was really funny. He just, but that's not the point. It is the point, honey. It's the whole point. And then the final thing that I want to discuss is just characters and how my attention has kind of shifted to different characters. So of course, as a teenager, the main focus is Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy. Duh. Like, it's still the main focus. It's the main relationship, like with a little bit about Jane and Bingley, but mainly it's Elizabeth and Darcy. As an adult, I am much better able to appreciate the minor characters, particularly Mrs. Bennet. She's hilarious. She's so socially inept, but she is hilarious. Her switch from when Lydia has eloped with Wickham from, oh, my poor nerves, I can't leave my bedroom, oh, despair, Mr. Bennet's going to die in a duel, to then hearing that Lydia is married. Oh, Lydia's married, how wonderful. And then, like, she's just great. I love her. Mr. Bennet is also quite funny, and I don't think I realized that at all as a teenager. Mr. Bennet is just kind of sitting there snarkily watching everything and occasionally commenting on it. And I didn't appreciate that at all as a teenager. I also really liked the Gardners this time around. I thought they were great characters, and they're Elizabeth's favorite family members, other than Jane, so I think we're very much meant to like them, and they're like basically the last line of the book. The last paragraph is, with the Gardners, they were always on the most intimate terms. Darcy, as well as Elizabeth, really loved them, and they were both ever sensible of the warmest gratitude towards the persons who, by bringing her into Derbyshire, had been the means of uniting them. So I was paying a lot more attention to the Gardners this time around, and they are very important for the whole plot of the book. And the fact that they get the last paragraph that's really interesting to me. So of course, while I am looking at Darcy and Elizabeth, because obviously, I am much better able to look at the side characters, the other minor characters who are important to the story, but who, you know, are not the main romantic couple. So obviously a 17-year-old or a 14-year-old isn't going to pay as much attention to them. But as an adult, like, they're some of the best characters. They really are. And they're where the humor mainly comes in. So those are just a few of the things that I noticed upon rereading Pride and Prejudice as an adult after not having read it for over a decade. I still adore this book. It's a 5-star from me. It was 5 stars when I read it at 14. It was 5 stars when I reread it at 17. Still 5 stars. I would say it's my second favorite Austen novel. Persuasion is the first. And yeah, I still love it just as much, if not more, for all the new insights that I now have as somebody who is older and has learned more about the time period. So let me know down in the comments below, what are your thoughts on Pride and Prejudice? When did you first read it? How often have you reread it? What's your favorite movie version? If you like this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more of my bookish content. It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.